Hi, everybody. Welcome. I feel like it's been years since I've been here. It has been 5 weeks. I hope you all had a great holiday. For those of you who are new to the channel, my name is Lori Hellis, and I am a retired criminal attorney and author of a book about the Vallow Daybell case. It's up here on my bookcase. And true crime blogger, I guess. um, so welcome. Uh, for those of you who might not know, about 5 weeks ago, just before Christmas, I had my left knee replaced. And I'm telling you what, knee replacement is not for sissies. I had my hip replaced a couple of years ago, and it was a way easier recovery than the knee has been. But I'm doing good. I was at physical therapy this morning, and I'm hitting all my goals. So I'm hitting all the benchmarks, and so I'm hoping to be 100% in the next few weeks. But at 5 weeks out, I'm doing okay. Still limping a bit, still doing stairs, sort of one stair at a time, but it'll come with time and persistence in physical therapy. So so thanks for everybody for your patience while I recovered and we had Christmas and New Year's. My husband also in late November had a cochlear implant, so he's been doing lots of therapy and working hard on getting adjusted to that as well. Um, and here in Oregon, we're supposed to have a big snowstorm. We have had very little snow, just a couple light dustings this season so far. Our ski Bend has a ski resort right outside of town, about 20 minutes outside of town, and on Mount Bachelor, and they just barely have been able to open last weekend. And so we're hoping for a big dump of snow up there in the mountains so that the ski resort can get running full tilt. Um, so don't forget to like this and subscribe, please. If hit that like and subscribe button. Be sure and turn on notifications. We do occasionally do a surprise live, depending on what's going on in the true crime world. So I always want to remind everybody that this is not legal advice, that although I am a retired lawyer, I still do a little pro bono work, still an active member of the bar. Nothing that we say here is legal advice. So tell me, how was your Christmas? I want to hear about it, about how what everybody did, and if it was good. We had a great Christmas. I'm super grateful for the fact that you all know I have one daughter. Her husband, his family have become like the other half of our family. We're all really close. So they all came to Central Oregon for Christmas, and we had everybody here. We had my son in law and his twin brother's girlfriend, plus his mom and dad. And because I was still laid up, they kind of took care of most everything for Christmas Eve and for Christmas Day. And I was super grateful that we were all able to be together and that we had so much fun. We had a great holiday. So, New Year's for us was quiet. We had went out for pizza with some close friends of ours, another couple that are close friends of ours, and then had a quiet evening at home. Smooched at midnight and said good night. So, I hope you guys all had a great holiday. Good. I'm seeing low key, stayed home, drama free, was a great holiday. I'm so glad to hear that you all had as good a holiday as we did. And so uh, I got a new headset with a new microphone. So please, if you have any feedback about that, let me know. That was one of my Christmas gifts. And so, so we have a lot to talk about in the true crime world. and also some things to talk about as we go into the new year, and I have some new ideas for some things that we might want to do. So, one of the things that I am hoping to get off the ground very soon, um, I just have been kind of setting up a little studio space to be able to do this, is a Patreon series on toxic grandmothers who are involved in true crime cases, or usually to get access to their grandchildren. And we're going to put that together with learning granny skills. So, the kind of things that we learned from our grandmothers, quilting and crocheting and cooking, and a lot of other fun things that we're going to do while we talk about toxic grandmothers. So, it is going to be, look for it. It is going to be called Chasing Justice: The Granny Files, and it will be available on Patreon. Once we get the first episodes up, I will make sure that you all get links and all of that. I'm also resurrecting the newsletter. Now that I'm not writing a book and moving and doing all the things that were going on, I am resurrecting the newsletter. So look for it in your mailbox, because I do have a newsletter coming out. I had a few questions about um, expert mental health evaluations and how it works. And you all know that the whole thing about John and Lauren Matthias um, has been an issue, and some things have come out. People have had questions about some of the um, evaluations that Dr. Matthias may have done. And so I wanted to dig into that a little bit more. So I decided that I would do it in a newsletter, because it just felt like a more comfortable place to sort of go a little bit in depth. And those evaluations, because they were SA evaluations and involved children, it's not necessarily the best thing to talk about on YouTube. So look for the newsletter this next week in your mailbox. Um, because the newsletter has been a little bit dormant for a while, I need to reactivate the Flowdesk process. So I am going to be sending it out to a handful of people, just so that Flowdesk knows that I'm serious about it and that they don't think that I'm suddenly spamming people. So it'll probably come out in batches. Um, but you should be getting it next week if you are subscribed to the newsletter. The link to subscribe is in the show notes. So we will be tackling some of the more um, complex issues, and issues that maybe are not 100% suitable for YouTube. So look for that. Um, Folks have asked me about the origami crane quilt, which people have sent squares in, that we are going to do for Kay and Larry Woodcock. They are JJ Vallow's grandparents. I probably need another 16 or so squares. So if you would like to make a square or make another square, there is a link in the show notes to my Google Drive where you can find the pattern. It is a foundation pieced, paper pieced quilt block. The only requirement is that it finish at 6.5 inches and that it be on a black background. You can use any kind of focus fabric that you want. And I'm going to keep mentioning that. Also, if you have recently picked up a copy of Children of Darkness and Light, if you would like a signed book plate for your book, drop me an email with your address. Rest assured, we don't share any of that information, but if you send me your mailing address, I will drop a signed book plate in the mail to you. Um, let me see what else is on my list. I did want to say thanks so much for the folks who were so supportive while I was getting my knee worked on. Several people were sweet enough to send me books to read and a few other little things, little treats and things, and I really appreciate it. I don't ask for those sort of things. We also don't really ask for super chats, although I see 39 Chicken Head said she had a toxic grandmother. Oh, I yeah, and that it sounds fun. Yeah, we're gonna talk about some really wild toxic grandmothers, and, so and thank you for your super chat. We don't solicit those, but we do appreciate 'em, when you chat with us. So, let me that's interesting. Somebody in the chat just said, "My newsletter link says under construction." Yes, you absolutely will have, access to back issues. There is a lengthy, a pretty long archive of past newsletters, and they will be available. So I will check with my IT guy. I had him working on it because when I tried to sign into Flowdesk, it wasn't connecting my email. So I will have him double check and make sure that that link is actually functional. So thanks for letting me know that, and um, we will let you know. Um, everybody will have access to the back issues. So the other kind of fun thing I wanted to tell everybody is you might not know this because I don't think it's anything I've ever talked about on a live. I have for my whole life been fascinated with honeybees, with bees in general, but and been fascinated with the with people who keep bees. So it was something I always thought I would like to do, um, but the last two places I lived, um, they didn't allow within the city limits for you to keep urban bees, and beekeeping and this whole ur urban beekeeping has become very important because of the collapse of the wild honeybee hives. And, it's a lot of things. It's, some viruses that impact the bees. It's also and some, mites that impact the bees. It's also the encroachment of urban living, and so there are a lot of local beekeeping organizations that are interested in and encouraging people to keep bees in their backyard. So it's something I've been toying with for quite a long time. So back when I had my birthday in September, my daughter and son-in-law enrolled me in the master beekeeping program as a beginner. And so I've been doing a little bit of educational stuff around beekeeping. And then I got a beehive for Christmas. So doesn't have bees in it yet. That is it's sort of a process. You have to sort of get your space ready for bees. And then in the spring, when they have the best opportunity to survive, then you get your first colony of bees and introduce them to your hive. So I'm super excited about that. I don't know at this point whether we're going to have bees this summer. I'm kind of hoping we are, but I'm going to sort of take that a step at a time. But I've always been utterly fascinated and a little enchanted with bees. So if anybody out there is a backyard beekeeper, I would love to hear from you. So drop me an email because I'm excited to do these things that I'm a novice at. Um, I think that lifelong learning is one of the most important things that we can do for our own well-being as well as the people around us. It keeps us healthy, it keeps us curious and intrigued. So I'm excited to do a little more life learning from the bees. So now that I've done all of that housekeeping stuff, let's dive in to what's been going on in true crime. I want to talk about some cases that you probably haven't heard about so much in the news, and of course many that you have. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the case of Shannon Collins. This is a case out of Arkansas, and Shannon Collins was an Army vet. He was a member of the National Guard, and he disappeared in 2021. His wife, I don't know whether she pronounces this Tressa or Teresa. It's Tresa, probably Tressa. And Brittany Collins is her daughter. And they have both, his body has never been found, but the family continued to collect his military veterans benefits um, after he was had disappeared and is presumed dead. So they are accused of wire fraud, federal wire fraud charges, um, but no charges have yet been filed in his death. So on the 20th of January, they are going to be um, standing trial for the the wire fraud charges. And like in a lot of cases, I think it's an effort by law enforcement to get these folks on something so that they're already in prison or already in jail and they can continue to um, investigate the case. So I don't think that they're done investigating and hoping to find Shannon Collins at all, but they are going forward with some kind of peripheral charges on the wife and the daughter. So, and then I wanted to talk about Lindsay Clancy. Now, Lindsay Clancy is a case that has been in the news a lot. For those of you who may not be familiar with the case, Lindsay Clancy was a labor and delivery nurse in Massachusetts. She sent her husband out to pick up takeout food and I think get something from the pharmacy. And while he was gone, it is alleged that she killed her 3 children and then jumped out of a second-story window in an attempt to take her own life. And the the allegation, the claim is that she was in the midst of a a postpartum psychosis induced um, mental health crisis. There was a hearing. I saw it today. I'm not sure whether it happened today or yesterday. A pretrial hearing. Now she is set for trial on July 20th of 2026. And the pretrial that was held was to talk a bit about the trial date um, and what is going to happen, how Lindsay is going to be um, transported back and forth. So what happened was after the incident happened, she was rushed to the hospital. It was determined that she was permanently paralyzed from the sternum down, and that she is in both a very fragile medical as well as mental health state. So her attorneys um, were informing the court that they believed that the sheriff's office, since the incident, she has been in a mental hospital where they also have been able to meet her physical disability needs. Her attorney came to court and wanted the court to understand um, how profound her physical and mental health needs are. So he reported to the court with a letter from a physician's assistant who works regularly with Lindsay Clancy and is responsible for her care. He came in with that and informed the court that he believed that the sheriff's department was saying, well, we've got a van that is wheelchair accessible, and we can just put her in the van and bring her over to the jail. The issue is that the hospital she is in and would have to go home to every night is an hour and 15 minutes, an hour and a half away in Massachusetts. And she would have to make that drive to and from every day for what appears that it could be a lengthy trial. They're saying 3 to 4 weeks, but we also have to take into consideration that if Lindsay Clancy is not able to physically be in court for full days, they may have to cut those court days short. So one of the things that that Lindsay Clancy's attorney was frustrated with was the fact that the sheriff simply called the facility that Lindsay's in and said, I need to talk about her medical condition and I need to talk about, what it's going to take to get her transported. And her lawyer was very adamant that that was a HIPAA violation and that he wanted to bring that to the court's attention that they did not have permission for the hospital to release that information to the sheriff's department. The prosecution argued that she's in sheriff's custody, and since she's committed to the care of the sheriff, they have the right to inquire about her condition. One of the things that her attorney was very pointed about is saying that her mental health is very, very fragile and that she remains a risk to try and take her own life. And so there is concern on his part that the sheriff's department is not taking that seriously. So now they're having to figure out, well, they said one of the things is that they need 2 nurses to be with her, primarily because to meet her physical needs, it takes 2 people. They need a flat bed that she can lie on while they take care of her. Remember, she is completely paralyzed from the sternum, the middle of her chest, down. She apparently has some use of her arms and has been able, with help, to transfer herself from bed to wheelchair and back. But a person who is in that condition, it's very detrimental for them to be sitting in a wheelchair for 8 hours a day at a counsel table. That's not healthy and not good for them. So it appears that her fragile condition is going to continue to be an issue. The judge said that he was going to issue an order. He was going to craft an order as best he could, and give everyone a draft, and then they were going to come back and review it. Now, Lindsay's case was originally scheduled to go to trial in February of this year, and the judge set it out for a couple of reasons. One was because there was a change of venue motion filed, and I don't believe that's been ruled on yet. Additionally, um, the prosecution, the state had asked for a mental and physical evaluation, and that had not been completed yet. So they had a conversation with the court about about discovery and whether or not all of the medical records that the experts would need had been provided. Now, the defense said they had already provided all those things, and they had no objection to the facility. Um, Typically, what would happen is those records would come to the court, and then the court would review them in camera, as they say, in their chambers, and determine what records were relevant or releasable, and then turn those over to the prosecution in this case, and they're experts. But the defense said, we don't have any objection to the prosecution getting all those records. We don't believe the court needs to be involved, and we would be fine with the hospital, the state hospital where she is, sending all that information directly to the prosecution. So that'll streamline that process. But the judge was very adamant that this case will go to trial in July, that all of the conversations that they had, the reason it was set out until July was so that that could be an absolute date certain. So, um, the question is, can't they do Zoom? She was on Zoom today, and I think they could do Zoom, but there is a constitutional right for a person to be present at their own trial and to be able to observe and to confront the witnesses against them. So it would a couple of things would probably have to happen. It it would all The first thing that would have to happen is that the defense would have to agree with it. The defense would have to agree that appearing by video conference would be an adequate replacement for her being present in the courtroom. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how the judge weighs that. And it is possible that the judge could come up with some sort of a hybrid where some days she's in court and some days she's there by Zoom. A lot of it's just going to depend on what she can withstand. And the judge did say, we're going to have to keep revisiting this throughout the trial because w- we she has not been out of the facility, traveled out of the facility since she arrived there. So this is all uncharted ground. So the judge said, we're going to have to keep assessing this as we go along. And a lot of it is going to be kind of developing as they go because they're going to have to try and take into consideration every day how her how she's feeling and what her condition is. Now, I understand that what she has done is absolutely horrible, but I think that we as a society really need to approach this with a bit of compassion. First of all, their claim is that she was in the throes of a psychotic break as a result of postpartum psychosis. And understand that for anybody who has experienced it, postpartum depression, postpartum mental health issues of any kind are something that are beyond a woman's control. Um, I myself had a bit of postpartum depression. Absolutely caught me off guard because, in spite of the fact that it took me 8 years to finally get pregnant, I had a very uneventful pregnancy. I didn't have a lot of what felt like mood swings and strange things going on. So it really caught me off guard when, after my daughter was born, and I had a good friend of mine who wasn't another lawyer, and she called me and she said, "So, are you crazy yet?" And I burst into tears because I thought, "Oh my God, I thought I didn't want to tell anybody. I was, it was too scary." Um, so, not everybody has great support, and not everyone, uh, the true postpartum psychosis is uncommon. Postpartum depression, such as Kelsey Fitzsimmons experienced, is very common, and we don't talk about it enough. Um, so you're right. Lindsay Clancy's husband has remained supporting her, and I did want to talk a little bit because obviously this is going to be a case that is going to be a an insanity defense. And we've talked before about the insanity defense. And I want to just talk a little bit about maybe refresh your memory about how this is reported. And what happens is it varies from state to state and how states approach it. So in most states, if you believe that your client suffered from a mental disease or defect at the time the crime was committed, you can assert a defense of not guilty by reason of insanity. Okay. So, what happens when that occurs is the only way that you can assert that is if you go to trial and then the jury or a judge adjudicates her as not guilty because of a mental disease or defect at the time the crime was committed. There are other states, like my home state of Oregon, who have taken a different approach. And in those states, we have what is called guilty but insane, GBI. And it is a nuanced approach. At first, it may seem a little bit um, odd. It may seem a little bit like, um, hang on, I just got a text from Jen, our moderator. She's having a little trouble. So uh, hopefully she will pop back in here. Uh, I'm not very good at doing two things at once. Um, so although it may seem at the outset like a bit of a nuanced approach, here's something that is not, here's, Jennifer's back. Here's the way it's different. So if you have a guilty but insane statute, then it is possible for somebody like Lindsay Clancy, who is probably at this point relatively competent, um, uh, being able to understand and aid and assist at this point, um, but still very mentally fragile. She and her attorney could sit down and look at all of the information, look at all of the medical records and the reports from experts, and they could go to the prosecutor and say, "My client would like to enter a guilty but insane plea." Now, in if the case were to go to trial, they would also be able to ask the jury to make a finding of guilty but insane. So there's two different ways you can get there. But in a basic insanity defense, the way you get to the defense is you have to go to trial. So in in states that have guilty but insane, a person can plead guilty to that. Now, what happens? Well, what happens is that person is then committed to the supervision of what is called the Psychiatric Security Review Board, PSRB. And so what happens in Oregon would be if she were in Oregon and were to plead guilty but insane, she would be committed to the PSRB. and they would be responsible for her supervision. They would then determine whether or not she ever becomes able to not be committed. But it is a very, um it's a rigorous process. It's probably worse than by a lot than a parole board. So, um, Coach Karen, you're right. Insanity is a high legal bar to reach in most states. Um, Knowing that also subjects most to life sentences because a doctor will very rarely release someone that's taken that defense. I agree that it is unlikely that she would be released, but she would be in a facility where they would be able to meet her physical and mental health needs. Um, Prisons are not hospitals. Prisons do not provide mental health treatment except at the most cursory level. Prisons typically, if you're in prison and you have the possibility of being released at some point and you are they're attempting to rehabilitate you, you will get a lot of um, group therapy works and work on moral and ethical how to rewrite your brain to understand right and wrong, those sort of programs. But you are not going to get hands on mental health therapy in prison. It's not going to happen. Additionally, you are not going to have two nurses stand by all the time and take care of you because of your physical needs. So, prison really is not the place for Lindsay Clancy. It's not the place for her because, yes, there are people in prison in wheelchairs, but with the level of her, um, with the level of her disability, I think it's going to be very difficult for any prison to want to take her on um, full time. So, um, but we will wait to see. That trial is going to come up in July. This is one of those cases where I wish that there were a different way to approach this. Um, no one claims that she didn't do a horrible thing and that she should suffer no responsibility for it. I don't think anybody takes that position. But we also have to meet defendants where they are. We have to meet defendants where they are physically, mentally, mental health wise. Um, and we have to have room in our system for people who may be developmentally disabled and may really not be able to understand the consequence of what they did. And there's a lot of there are too many people in jail who are in jail because of they have severe mental health issues. Um, so I think our system needs to do a better job, and we're not. We're failing. Um, Speaking of that, before I go on to the next case, I recently connected with a, a, a man in just on social media in Oregon, and he posted that he and his wife adopted 3 children through the foster care system. The first two were children who were severely um, abused, and both of them assessed and diagnosed with attachment disorder, with reactive attachment disorder, RAD. And these are some of the most difficult and intractable childhood mental health issues to treat. And his 2 foster children, the third foster child was they got as an infant and was and adopted stayed with them and then was adopted. But um, the two older children, one is now in prison and one is facing charges that will likely land him in prison as well. And we had kind of a lengthy discussion about the resources that are available. And when I will say in Oregon that the resources are abysmal, that an awful lot of these folks, they're handed these children and then they're expected to act as if they were children born to them who have no problems. And they don't get the support from the state that they need to and from the system. Because what really needs to happen is they need to have absolute wraparound services. The services need to just envelop the whole family, and that is not what happens. It's bits and pieces, piecemeal. There's an awful lot of, "Let's just try this and see if this works," an awful lot of, "Let's throw it at the wall and see what sticks," and these families, are the people who suffer as a result. So I'm hoping that we're going to see our states do better, because what we know is they end up as adults in the prison system, just exactly what happened in this case. Even though these parents were educated and spent a lot of time educating themselves on the best way to help their children with RAD, that they were devoted to these kids. They accessed and advocated for programs and treatment for them. It simply wasn't enough. And as a result, the pipeline took them right to adult prison. So we know these are the kind of folks that are pipelining into our prisons, and prisons aren't isn't the place to treat them. They're not going to get any treatment that is going to help them cope with the childhood trauma that caused the root of their problems during the most important brain development years, that are baked into their brains because of it. They're not going to get help with that in prison. They're going to get warehoused, and they're probably going to get in more trouble, and they're going to end up being lifelong offenders, and they're going to be coming in and out of through that revolving prison door until finally they're there forever. And it's unfortunate that these families are put in the position of having to say, "This child that I love dearly and that I have devoted my life to, I am now having to stand there and hold these two things in my heart. On one hand, I am incredibly relieved that this person is in prison where they can't hurt anybody else, because these people, in both of these cases, they're in the system because of violence. So on one hand, they're holding in their hearts this relief that this person is not going to be able to hurt anyone else. And on the other hand, this love and grief and guilt of being the parent of this person. And so, you know, we go about it wrong. And I've said this for many years, way beyond um, the most recent political climate. I have said this for many years. We make a mistake and we don't front load services for families with young children. We don't intervene in families with young children early enough and assertively enough so that we head off the abuse and the trauma that occurs, that that damages them forever. And I I hope that um, I say these things because I want to bring awareness to this. I want you all to be aware in your cities and your communities what's going on in terms of it's not just foster care. It's it's the mental health services that are not being provided at the level that they need to be provided at early enough and and aggressively enough so that we head off a lifetime of pain and suffering for that child and all the people around them and the people they hurt. We're not doing enough with that. We're simply taking them once they've already committed a crime and warehousing them so that they're not going to hurt anybody else. That's that's not that's not compassion. That's not th- it's just not the right approach. Um, so we're going to move on to the next case now that I've been on my soapbox, and we're going to talk about Jennifer Gledhill. She's from Utah. You know, it's an awful lot of cases in Utah these days. Seems like they're all in Utah or Florida, but or Massachusetts. But as Melanie Little says, Massachusetts is where your constitutional rights go to die. So I don't know if Massachusetts is going to improve their situation anytime soon. But let's talk about Jennifer Gledhill. She is scheduled for a status conference on the 29th of January in Utah. And this is another missing National Guardsman. Matthew Johnson went missing in Utah, was a member of the Utah National Guard. He was married to Jennifer Gledhill. Jennifer confessed to her lover that she had shot Matthew, that she had taken the luggage carrier off the top of her car into the house, loaded him into it, and then loaded it into her car and disposed of his remains. She confessed to her lover that she shot him while he slept. And interestingly enough, her parents were arrested for helping clean up. I've shown pictures of them before, and they look remarkably like Lori Vallow's mother and father. Her parents were arrested for helping in the cleanup. The law enforcement found blood under the carpet, a substantial amount of blood under the carpet, but his remains have never been found. So it's a no body murder case. Um, and the end of January, wishful thinking, end of July, um, there's going to be a pretrial to set a trial date and to set dates for motions. It's been pending for a while, so I expect that it will likely go to trial pretty soon. Um, it's very odd that in spite of the fact that the police have ample evidence of Matthew being losing a substantial amount of blood in the bedroom, proof of the parents helping clean up, and the uh, the confession to the lover, she is still at this point going forward with trial. So um, the next thing we have is Larry Millette. That's a California case, and Maya Millette has been missing since 2021. Another missing since 2021. Once again, her remains have never been recovered. He has been that case has been pending a long time. He is now set for trial in March 9th of 2026, and hopefully that will finally get to trial because it has been delayed and delayed and delayed. So we're going to be keeping an eye on that one. Two more cases out of Utah. The first one is Corey Richens. We saw some pretrial hearings go on this week. There was an earlier pretrial that was televised. This most recent one, which started today and is supposed to go through tomorrow, was not going to be televised. It was not going to be public because there was a substantial amount of discussion about motions in limine. Now, you know, because you follow me and a lot of other law tubers, what motions in limine are. Motions in limine are to limit their evidentiary motions to limit evidence that comes in at trial, or motions in lemonade, as Melanie Little calls them, because her captions changed it to that one time. So motions in limine are motions where you go to the judge and you say, Judge, I don't think this particular piece of information should be presented to the jury because I believe that it's more prejudicial than it is probative, or it falls under some particular exception to the evidence code. So, yes, Kate Girl Maya was in San Diego. I keep catching little blips from the chat. So Corey Richens, there are two different cases for her. One is financial crimes, and the other is the murder of her husband, who it is alleged she gave a fentanyl overdose to. While she was incarcerated, one of the things that the court is going to be discussing during these closed hearings are evidentiary rulings on cap what has been called the walk the dog letter. It was a letter that Corey Richens wrote, which was discovered in her cell before it went to her mother. Uh, it was um, she had drafted it to be sent to her mother, but it hadn't been sent yet. And they found it in her cell, and it was essentially an outline of how the mother and her Corey's brother could falsify evidence and uh, dig up witnesses so that to make it look as if her husband unalived himself or took a drug overdose himself. The reason it's called the walk the dog letter is that it was a handwritten letter, and across the very top of it was written walk the dog. Nobody really knows why it was called the walk the dog letter, but it is. And nobody knows why she wrote that on there, but that's how it's identified. It was a handwritten letter, fairly lengthy, and it really sort of outlined an entire scenario story for what the mother and uh, the sorry, I keep seeing things in chat. Uh, what the mother and the brother, what Corey wanted the mother and the brother to say, that her husband had gone to Mexico, that he brought back drugs, that somehow he was a drug user. And uh, it was very clear that they were trying to concoct a story and to help Corey. So one of the reasons why the judge said we need to close the hearing is because he didn't want that information coming out in a way that could jeopardize the um, the jury pool. Um, the judge was concerned that if he ruled that that letter doesn't come in, but the potential jurors had already heard about it, that it could prejudice the trial. So at this point, we're waiting to hear whether or not um, whether or not I have got to stop looking at the chat because I keep seeing things and thinking, oh, I need to talk about that. It's not clear at this point what the judge is going to rule on those motions in limine, but we should hear something back shortly. Now, Corey Richens' trial is set to begin the 23rd of February. So these preliminary hearings they're getting down to the wire. So I'm sure we're going to get information and on rulings on those pretty quickly. And I think there have been enough delays in that case that I suspect that the court is not going to permit any more delays. Also from Utah is the case of Catherine Restelli. Um, Her husband was, she pled guilty to luring her husband to his death. She was charged with murder and conspiracy because they were separated, and she convinced him that he should come back to Utah to get her and the kids, and that they were going to reconcile. And when they got there, her brother claims that he killed Matthew in self-defense. What does that sound like? Um, and After the police thought, this is a little suspicious because this guy who's left-handed is laying in the entryway of the house with a knife next to his right hand. It is a little odd and suspicious and looked very staged. And as they pressed Catherine, the wife, she confessed and rolled over on the other two. In spite of that, the mother, Tracy Grist, is set for trial on the 12th of January, and her brother, Kevin Ellis, is set for trial on the 20th of January. So we will wait to see whether or not that goes to trial. A case that I have been interested in since early days, and is the case of Dee Warner, uh, who was the victim. Her husband, Dale Warner, has been charged with her murder. Early on in this case, there wasn't a body. Her family went to court civilly to try and have her declared um, dead so that they could deal with her estate. This was a later in life marriage for both Dee and Dale, and she apparently came into the marriage with assets, and her children wanted to be able to deal with her estate, but they she she wasn't dead legally. Um, and that's where it stood for quite a long time. Then he was then kind of surprisingly arrested and has been waiting in custody to be for his trial. That trial is supposed to come up on the 27th of January, and they have been doing some preliminary hearings. Um, sh- Probably 6 months ago, maybe a little more, um, Dee's body was finally found in a chemical storage tank on Dale Warner's property, some kind of rural, like, farm property. And so the judge recently denied a change of venue. This case is in Michigan. And so the defense has now come back and said, because this is a high profile case and you denied our motion for change of venue, to get maybe a jury pool that is a little bit less familiar with the case, we want more peremptory challenges than are typically allowed. And the judge agreed to increase the um, the the number of peremptory challenges from 12 to 18 for both sides. That's not an unreasonable alternative. You know, if you have uh, a, a, a jury pool that you believe has had too much exposure to a case, then maybe increasing it and giving each side 6 more challenges is going to help weed out that. Guys, I need a haircut. Um, The judge also said he was going to call in 700 potential jurors in order to hopefully seat a jury. So um, that case is going to get underway here right smartly, um, and we should be hearing more about that. I'm hoping that that case is going to be televised. I know there's a great deal of interest in it, um, particularly in the Midwest. Now we have Veronica Butler and Jillian Kelly, who were the victims of toxic grandma Tiffany Adams and her gang of five. So there have been some interesting developments. This case is in Oklahoma, and there have been some interesting developments. Veronica Butler was traveling to meet Tiffany Adams at a meeting point to exchange her children. Veronica Butler's two children were in the custody of their grandmother, Tiffany Adams. Veronica was very likely going to regain custody of her children, something that Grandma Tiffany didn't want to have happen. And so she was required to have a court-approved supervisor with her when she was with the children. And, yeah, bad Tiff, Tiff Knox, bad Tiff. So, they plan to meet at this incredibly remote, rural, just crossroads and a vacant old building at the place. Not really a great place to securely to do anything, but they met there, and unfortunately, rather than bring the children, um, Tiffany Adams brought four other people who then attacked and murdered both Veronica and Jillian Kelly, who was the supervisor. She was the pastor's wife. Um, two of the co-defendants, actually three now, three of the co-defendants have already rolled and have pled guilty. I was very surprised a couple of months ago when Tiffany Adams decided to plead guilty. She clearly was the ringleader and the organizer, and I think that um, she was doing all she could to avoid the death penalty. So, but there are two defendants that are still um, set for trial. One is Tad Cullum, and he is set for trial on the 1st of June. And then the other one is Cole Twombly, and he is set for an October 19th court date. Now, Tiffany Adams is scheduled to be sentenced this month on the 28th of January. So she's going to receive her sentence. No doubt it's going to be life in prison without the possibility of parole. I think that she struck that deal because she was pretty certain that she was going to get the death penalty, and there were a lot of folks who had the two other co-defendants had given very detailed accounts of what happened, and it was quite clear that she was the organizer from the outset. So, we talked a little bit earlier about juveniles and juvenile court, and we have the interesting case of Derek Rosa. He's out of Florida. He was 13 years old at the time that he is alleged to have killed his mother. He is being tried as an adult. I want to say he's 17 now. Um, but there were some really, really troubling things that came out about him. He tried to blame his stepfather for his mother's death, and but it came out that he was sort of cosplaying and that he wanted to be Jason from Friday the 13th, and a whole lot of other really terrible details. So that's going to be an interesting one to watch. 13 is pretty young to be tried as for a crime that occurred when a person's 13. In my home state, in Oregon, 15 is the cutoff to be remanded to adult court. So if you are under the age of 15, it things have to be adjudicated in juvenile court. Um, but that doesn't appear to be the case in Florida. So Barry Morphew is still hanging out there. Those of you who know this story, it's been hanging around for a long time. That's out of Colorado. And we have Barry Morphew, we have Suzanne Morphew, who disappears on Mother's Day. How many years ago has it been, folks? I don't even know. She disappears. There's no body. Nobody knows what happens to her. And Barry Morphew is the suspect, but they don't really have enough evidence to charge him. He is charged. Then it comes to pass that the prosecutor is accused of misconduct and is ultimately disbarred, and they then dismiss the charges against Barry Morphew. In the meantime, there are groups out hunting for a body, and they stumble across Suzanne Morphew's remains. They weren't actually looking for her, they were looking for somebody else, but they stumble across her remains. They Even though the remains are pretty much just skeletal, they are able to test the bone marrow in the bones, and it proves to be positive for an animal sedative that Barry Morphew was known to use on deer around his property. And in fact, at the time of Suzanne's disappearance, investigators found a cartridge for a dart gun that you would use to dart an animal um, in the dryer of their house. And so there was always suspicion that Barry had used one of those tranquilizer drugs on Suzanne. However, there wasn't enough to prove that until her remains were found, and it was discovered that she had that high-powered tranquilizer in her remains. So, um, so after her remains were found, Barry Morphew was once again indicted, and the matter went to a grand jury. And since then, his attorneys have been delaying entering a plea for him. The attorneys said there are mountains and mountains of discovery. Oh, thank you, Tiff. Mother's Day 2020. I thought it was 2020, but I wasn't 100% sure. Um, so the court, one of the things that has been going on in this case is that the court decided not to allow live streaming because some creator out there violated the rules having to do with live streaming. So that is not a case. It is a case that is not going to be live streamed as it stands. Barry Morphew's daughters have remained very supportive of him and have time and time again said they don't believe that he committed the crime. Um, so his attorneys have been trying to delay entering a plea because they have all this discovery, and they have said repeatedly, we have all this discovery. How can we advise our client about what kind of a case there is against him if we haven't had a chance to see and analyze all the discovery? So they have been setting out his entry of plea for a long time. Now, there's some sense in doing that. If you have a case where it's possible that you have a client that may want to enter a plea, um, then you want to be able to lay out all the facts. Kind of, I always said it was like the Chinese buffet. I lay it all out, and then you have to pick from column A and column B. So I think that's what's been going on with Barry Morphew. His lawyers are trying to lay out all the evidence against him and say, here's the pros and cons to entering a plea. here's the sum, here's the stuff against you, here's the stuff that the places where the state's case is weak, and really give him a full understanding of the case. And that's our responsibility. Our responsibility is to thoroughly and appropriately advise our client on what they can expect if they go to trial. But the judge at the last hearing said, on the 12th of January, you must enter a plea. Um, I I would be very surprised if it's just not a not guilty or a stand silent kind of an entry plea. Um, you can, as Lori Vallow did and a lot of other people we've seen have done, stand silent when asked, and then the judge enters a not guilty plea on your behalf. And there are some reasons to do that, um, so that you're not in any way suggesting that you might be guilty. It's kind of a hangover from olden days, standing silent, standing on your right to remain silent. Um, i- in some cases, it was questioned if you don't remain silent, s- if you say not guilty, have you waived your right to remain silent? Most courts say that that entering a not guilty plea is a formality and that it absolutely does not waive your right to remain silent. But in some states, people still prefer to stand silent and to have the judge interpret that as a not guilty plea. So we will wait to see what he does. I suspect it's going to be a, a not guilty plea because I don't think that they have had nearly enough time to process and understand all the evidence and make a decision whether or not he might enter a plea. And that is a very difficult thing if he has been telling his children for the last 5 years, I'm not responsible. Then to have to go into court and admit, well, maybe I'm responsible. Even in an Alford plea, that's tough. So there's going to have to be a lot of groundwork plowed for Morphew with his children as well as with because remember they're the victims. When they go into court, they're the ones who would be giving victim impact statements. So there's a lot of groundwork that is going to need to be done if and before, if at all, Barry Morphew enters a plea. So we'll wait to see. But the judge has had enough of the fooling around and has said we're going to enter a plea on the 12th. So one of the toughest cases that we've been covering is that of Kelsey Fitzsimmons, again out of Massachusetts, where people's civil rights and constitutional rights go to die. Kelsey Fitzsimmons was first uh, a, a prison guard, jail guard, and then later became a city cop and was on the local police force of the suburban area where she lived. She was engaged. I think the guy's name is Jason. Um, I keep trying to forget his name because I really don't like him. But corrections officer, thanks, Tiff. um, a turnkey, Anyway, uh, she was working as a full-time police officer. She and her fiance had a baby together. The little boy was about 4 months old. They had a wedding planned, and they went away for a long weekend for their bachelorette weekend. While they were on the weekend, the boyfriend, fiance, claimed that she had become intoxicated and that she had been physically violent with him. There weren't any witnesses. It was his word against hers. But there was no question that she had suffered, once again, from postpartum depression. So, sorry, got to rearrange my knee here. She had wisely reported this to her employer. Uh, she was a law enforcement officer, and they had put her on a medical leave, and they had suspended her right to have firearms. After she received treatment and was doing better, and on the recommendation of her mental health treatment provider, she was allowed to go back to work. She was cleared to go back to work. She was cleared to own and carry firearms. So then they go on this honeymoon, I'm sorry, bachelor weekend, and this incident happens. And the fiance boyfriend, they end up kind of staying separate. The little boy, the baby is about 4 months old, is with Kelsey, and he reaches out to her. She's living in the house she bought. It's her own home with the child, and the boyfriend calls her and says, "Hey, come down to this park and meet me so we can talk about things." She goes to the park to meet him. He doesn't show up because he's down at the courthouse getting a family violence restraining order. And that restraining order also gives him custody of the baby. She's still breastfeeding. So she gives up on waiting around for him at the park, and she goes back to her own home. And a little while later, colleagues of hers, these are people who she works with on the police force, show up at the door. And they say, "We're here to serve this restraining order." And the restraining order orders you to hand over the baby to the fiance. So he shows up with Kelsey's mother, and they're all trying to kind of facilitate this. She's hysterical. And at one point, there's two police officers. At one point, she says, "I need to go upstairs to her bedroom," which is an upstairs loft, to pack a bag for the baby. And while she's up there, one of the officers goes up with her, one stays downstairs with Jason and the mother. And she goes upstairs to pack the bag for the baby. Now, this is where things go. There are differing uh, reports of what happened. The police officer says Kelsey pulled a gun and pointed it at him. She says she picked up the gun and pointed it at herself because in that moment where everything was crashing in on her, she intended to take her own life. He then shot her in the chest. She was airlifted to the hospital. She spent almost 60 days in the hospital before she was released. She was arraigned in her hospital bed. And after she was released, they went um, to a release hearing. After she was released from the hospital, they had a bail hearing. And the judge agreed to release her on house arrest with a provision. Now, there was no indication that she routinely used alcohol or that she had a problem with alcohol, but alcohol was involved in the incident that was alleged in the restraining order. So the judge ordered that she be on a GPS monitor, but also ordered that she um, report to what's called a SCRAM device. Now, there are several different iterations of SCRAM devices. Some of them are the ankle monitor that is in contact with your skin and registers through perspiration whether or not you've consumed alcohol. A lot of people say that those are not the most reliable, but they also have these devices that anytime that randomly the alarm goes off and you're required to blow into these devices. Now, anybody who has ever done a breathalyzer, and I've tried them at times because every time I'm at a criminal law conference, they have them out and for people to try. You know, you've had a couple of glasses of wine, we'll try it and see what you blow. It's a way for lawyers who routinely deal with the results of breathalyzers to understand how they work, to understand what it feels like to be able to have to blow in them. So it's important to understand that it is not just a little puff. This is a sustained, you fill your lungs and you blow until your lungs are absolutely empty. And there is a gauge on the device. And if you don't blow long enough and hard enough, it won't register the result. So when Kelsey Fitzsimmons got out of the hospital, she had massive chest injuries. She had collapsed lungs. She had shattered ribs. She had liver lacerations. I mean, she was in very fragile health. And one of the problems that she was having is that it was extremely painful for her to blow into that scram device. So her attorney went back to court a day or two later and went to the judge with the support from the parole and probation people who were monitoring the scram device, monitoring her release, and said, Judge, it is extremely painful for her to do it. She had been doing it. She had not missed blowing into the device, but he went back to the court and said, we would like to alter the release provisions because it is very painful for her because of her injuries. And we would like accommodations under the Americans with Disability Act. And the judge said, here's your accommodation. If she can't blow in the machine, she's going to jail. And she revoked her release. So for a month or two, she was in jail, and her attorney was working hard to get her out. They filed an emergency petition with the SJC. That's the Supreme Court of Massachusetts, the Supreme Judicial Court. And 2 days before Christmas, the Supreme Judicial Court upheld the judge's ruling that her release was revoked. But she was released just before Christmas, I think on the 23rd, because her attorney said she had healed sufficiently to be able to comply with blowing into the scram unit. She's currently living with her mother. She has sold her house to pay for her legal fees and medical bills, and she is still fighting for contact with her baby boy. Her fiance filed a motion to impound all of the proceeds from her home sale, even though it was her home alone. He had no interest in it. Filed to impound those funds against future child support, even though he doesn't have permanent custody of the child. And she was she was indicted on one count of assault. It's similar to assault with a deadly weapon. I cannot remember exactly, but us, but the grand jury refused to indict her on attempted murder charges. So she is facing a potential felony, but she could also be facing probation. So the issue of who is going to have custody of their baby is not by any means settled. But he currently has the baby and is giving her a really hard time about seeing the baby, insisting that she see the baby supervised and a whole lot of other awful things. So, um, just 2 more cases I wanna talk about. Uh, oh, so I'm sorry, I wanted to tell you that Kelsey Fitzsimmons' case is set for the 9th of February. That one absolutely is going to be televised. I know that Melanie Little has been right on it, and I'm sure that she, among many others, will be live streaming it and with commentary. So you all wanted somebody in the chat asked where they can get my book. It is available wherever books are sold. Amazon, books.com, Powell's Books, Barnes and Noble, any of those places. So and do let me know if you order one and then you'd like a book plate. I'm happy to send them. The last 2 cases I want to talk about are Nick Reiner and Adrian Gonzalez. These are 2 cases that are we're hearing a lot about in the news right now. First of all, Nick Reiner. Nick Reiner is the middle son of producer and actor Rob Reiner, the grandson of the great Carl Reiner, and Nick is accused of murdering his father, Rob Reiner, and his mother, Susan. I'm sure you guys will tell me. Oh, somebody in the chat said my book is also available on Audible, so you can listen to it as well as read it. So the big development that happened with Nick Reiner was he was indicted on 2 counts of murder. Originally, Alan Jackson was retained to represent him. You all know Alan Jackson. He's a very well-known California lawyer. He was pretty much lead counsel for Karen Reed in both of her trials. So you've seen plenty of him. He's also represented a lot of famous people. Today, Alan Jackson announced that he needed to withdraw. They were there for arraignment on the indictment, and Alan Jackson came forward and said that he was going to have to withdraw from the case. And they appointed a public defender. Now, I don't know whether that will continue to be that a public defender will continue to be his lawyer. I understand that the woman that they have appointed is a very experienced and very good public defender. So, why would Alan Jackson withdraw? Well, there may have been a couple reasons. We've heard in the media that that Nick Reiner may have some fairly substantial mental health issues. And I can speak from experience in saying that it is sometimes difficult to connect and to get on the same page with a client that has serious mental illness. And sometimes it is just that they don't, you just don't mesh with that person. Your style doesn't mesh with their level of illness. And there are cases where you just cannot do your best work for your client because of that. So that may be part of it. The fact that they appointed a public defender, I think he has limited access to his own to whatever money he may have inherited from his family. Whatever I had heard that he had a trust fund um, that wouldn't have that he would have had access to because wouldn't have been part of his parents' estate. But we don't know what the financial situation is, so it's possible that part of it is financial as well. But whatever it is, Alan Jackson, who we have seen in action and I find to be a very honest and ethical lawyer, um, from all outward appearances, um, had to withdraw. So the prosecution did not object to his arraignment being delayed, and at this point, his arraignment will happen on the 23rd of February. So giving the new lawyer time to get up to speed on the case and also time to get to know and uh, create a rapport with Nick. Because when you have a client that has, I mean, a lawyer has to create a rapport with any client that they work with. But when you have a person who's got some serious mental illness, um, it's work to get to a position where you have a rapport with your client to the point where they're like, yeah, okay, she's okay, and um, I'm gonna believe that she has my best interests at heart, and that sometimes it doesn't happen, which is then you get, like Alan Jackson, you're withdrawing, but we will see, how that case moves along. As I say, everything I've heard is that the public defender who's been appointed is a career public defender with a very good reputation, so well able to take on a complex case. And California does have the death penalty, although the governor has suspended executions. So it is possible that the state could be seeking the death penalty. Um, Alan Jackson did say that he outright said Nick Reiner is not guilty. Um, so I think that he does support him and believes that for whatever reason that Nick is likely because of the mental health issues, could be found not guilty. So, and then the last thing I wanted to talk about before we open things up for questions is Adrian Gonzalez. Adrian Gonzalez is the police officer in Uvalde, Texas, that is being prosecuted for not responding appropriately to the school shooting at Uvalde. Um, these cases are, I mean, we had one, and the officers found not guilty. These cases are trying to assess a level of responsibility for this horrendous tragedy, whether it is um, the Crumbleys and Ethan Crumbly's parents being prosecuted for his actions, or police officers being held to a higher standard when it comes to responding to these sorts of incidents. So it's kind of new ground. I mean, it really is a little bit of uncharted territory. So, um, but something interesting happened today in his trial. Um, they were calling some of the first witnesses. It may have even been the first witness, who was one of the teachers at the school. And while this woman was on the stand, she gave information that she had never before disclosed. It was information about whether or not she had seen the shooter. And in her grand jury testimony and in her initial interview, she said that she had seen dust popping up off the playground and heard what she thought were shots and thought that the dust popping up was shots being fired. But she didn't ever say that she had actually seen the gunman. Then on the stand today, she said, "I saw the gunman dressed in black, he had long hair, and he was carrying a gun." That was new information. So there were a couple of things. The defense jumped up and said, "Wait a minute, this is information that should have been given to us." And it came out that this teacher had disclosed that during the interviews, the trial prep interviews that she had done with the prosecution. And the prosecutor said, "Well, I didn't think it was that big a deal because other people had seen the shooter. It was simply like cumulative information." But the defense said, "Yes, but first of all, it's impeachment information. And second, it may or may not corroborate the testimony of the other people who were there. It could conflict with them. They could be saying, 'I saw him over here.' 'No, I saw him over there.' What the heck?" So, um, the defense argued very vociferously that this was uh, a problem, and that it was a discovery violation, and they moved for a mistrial. Now, we've talked about this before. Mistrials are hard to get, and you really need to be able to prove clear-cut prosecutorial misconduct where it's intentional. It's not negligent, it's an intentional act to hide it. And so after considering it, the judge denied the motion for a mistrial ultimately. But the judge stopped the trial, sent the jury home, and went through all of this information. They did sort of a voir dire of the witness about what she had seen. They they even put the prosecutor under oath, and the prosecutor gave testimony, which is pretty unlikely to happen in most cases. And um, when it was all said and done, they went through the grand jury testimony. When all was said and done, the judge decided that it did not rise to the level of a mistrial. However, he was not very complimentary of the prosecution, and did believe that that the prosecutors knew that information. That what was unclear was whether the prosecutor who was doing the trial prep interview understood that she had not said that during grand jury. Um, there were apparently several prosecutors on the case. Yes, potentially uh, Brady Giglio. Hi, excited utterance. Welcome. That is Hella, the Hella. It's great to meet you and see you in our chat. Welcome. Yes, it does sort of bleed over into the Giglio and Brady territory. Um, but the the question really sort of turns on how much the prosecutors knew, if they knew that the witness was going to say that, and if they intentionally didn't tell the defense. So I think the judge felt like it was probably a negligent oversight on their part. It shouldn't have happened, but it certainly didn't rise to the level of a mistrial. Um, yeah, and as you said, if it's super duper intentional and you're Alec Baldwin, you might get to go home, and that's really true. Yeah, sometimes you have to be a movie star too. Uh, so thanks for that, and thanks for joining us tonight. Um, uh, eh, Hella is in Australia. Let's see. If I do my math, is it about midday there? It's been a long time since I visited Australia, so, but great to see you here and welcome. Um, so with that, I'm gonna continue to watch the Gonzalez trial. I think that one is of interest for the reasons we've talked about. It's not very straightforward, and the law is somewhat unsettled around these cases. So I am interested. Um, I will say that I am always utterly awestruck by our law enforcement and first responders who run toward the gunfire. I think that runs absolutely counter to every bit of our own self-preservation, of our own animal instincts. So I have nothing but the highest regard for our law enforcement and our first responders who, time and time again, as people are running away, they they run toward the gunfire. So thank you to first responders. Um, I think it's time for questions. So let's chat. Please, uh, Jen, let me know whether you have been able to get in and post questions. If you have not, I can do it. So just let me know. Drop me a text. Um, in the meantime, please, oh, Jen's got a post here. Type the word question or all Q's in caps so she can find them. Uh, and please, please, please hit the like button. Oh, she says she still can't post anything. So I can do it. Um, you know, we haven't been on StreamYard for the last 5 weeks, and they change things up sometimes. So we will try and work the glitches out for next time. So I'll go through and see if we have questions. You have to be patient with me because I have a little trouble reading the screen and doing all of this at the same time. But um, we'll get through it. And so please hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and hit the bell for notifications so that we will let you know. We don't do a lot of unscheduled lives, but occasionally, if there's something really big breaking, we do. Especially if it's something that has a really interesting legal case. So I have a note here that says, please follow the Melody Buzzard case. That's such a sad case. It's such a hard case. Um, this, again, appears to be a mother that has some pretty severe mental health issues and very, very sad case. So I will follow it and I'll keep an eye on it for you. Um, I want to thank everybody who sent us Happy New Year and New Year wishes and Christmas wishes. And I'm glad that a lot of you had drama-free holidays. Thank you again, 39 Chicken Head, for the super chat. We appreciate those, although we don't ask for them. But we appreciate them. You absolutely do not have to send a super chat to ask a question in our lives. Oh, thank you, Polly Olson. She said I can use her to test the linkage to the newsletter, which I will do. And yeah, let me see. We talked about that, about the newsletter, and I will definitely get with my IT guy and let him know so he can work it out. Polly also says she's excited for the grandma Patreon. She'll be signing up. She made the sampler quilt with us. We did a few years ago during COVID. And I shared my favorite bread recipe she says she makes every week. Um, and we did a sampler quilt, just kind of a learn and go sort of thing. And then we raffled it off and we donated the money for uh, uh, missing and exploited children. That's what I was trying to come up with. Dang, you get to be 70 years old and it gets to be late in the evening, your brain just doesn't function. Backlit issues of the newsletter are available in in the archive as soon as we get that little kink worked out. Um, Lots of folks giving everybody great good wishes. Daz Larson says, "My goodness, bees are in my wheelhouse. So glad you're one of us." Ah, yeah. I want to be. I'm just sort of dipping my toe in the water, but anybody who's got feedback, email me, and we'll start a conversation uh, about bees and beekeeping because I'm excited about that. Apiary queen. Thanks, Tiff. It is so great to be back and to see all of you. I really appreciate all the good wishes and your patience. I know there's a lot of other places you can go on Wednesday nights, so I'm glad that you're back. Um, let me see what other sorts of questions and comments we can come up with. I'm kind of whizzing through them really quickly. Um, we talked a bit about HIPAA, and people had some comments about that. Lots of law or medical folks had comments about Lindsay Clancy's condition. Uh, so I'm just going to keep on scrolling here until we find some questions. Um, I'm going to. Okay, I'm gonna post this because 'cause I'm in charge of posting stuff. And Coach Karen, I think you're right sometimes. Um, I'm gonna say it out loud. There's more support for men with ED and midlife crisis than women with postpartum or even any depression. It's too easy to say, "It's just hormones, get over it." Yeah, you're right. Um, and we all need to be better about bringing attention to that. Yeah. Um We had lots of comments about mental health when we talked about the family that, adopted the foster kids. Uh, so I'm trying to whiz through these just as quick as I can, and we'll find some questions. Do put the word question or cues up front, please, as I'm scrolling toward the bottom. Um, there is an interesting case that I am going to be following out of Portland, Oregon, which is close to me. I'm in Central Oregon. I'm about a 3-hour drive from Portland, and it's a really interesting case. I met this woman at CrimeCon, and her daughter was one of 5 women who were homeless. Um, It's unclear whether, there were homeless women who definitely, had drug and alcohol issues. Um, it's unclear whether or not some of them may have been sex workers. But, bodies started appearing in Portland, and initially, people said, "Is this a serial killer?" And law enforcement said, "Oh, no, no, they were found in different locations. One was found across the Columbia River in Vancouver, Washington, and no, no, they're not related." Well, this woman, who was the mother of one of the women, wouldn't take that as an answer, and it is because she really dug into this and would not take no for an answer and went out and did her own investigation and worked hard through it, that they finally, caught this guy, and it was, in fact, 5 serial killings, and, she's a fascinating woman, and he is now in custody, and his trial is not set until 2027. So I've really got my eye on that case, and I would definitely like to bring it to you as it develops. Right now, it is still in the pretrial stage. So I'm trying to talk and read chat at the same time. Not anything I would ever be good at. Um, and certainly not now. Um, I'm not sure if that was a question. So let me just keep zooping through. Um, Let me see here. Hi, Coach Karen. Thanks, Lori. I did 20 years volunteer fire and EMS and two law enforcement until I blew my shoulder. Dispatched for 4 and hated it. I needed to be hands-on. Girl, I'm with you. I don't. I definitely want to be hands-on. It's one of the reasons I wasn't a tax lawyer. I wanted to be in the trenches and be where things were happening. So I don't blame you. But thank you so much for your service. Um, and your community, I'm sure, is much better off because of it. Um, let's see. Oh, yay. Hella, thanks for letting me know. She said, I slid into your DMs on X. I'm not a big user of X, so I'm glad you let me know because now I will go and check. Um, I've kind of stayed away from X. It gets a little bit um, icky, for lack of a better word. Melanie Little calls it the cesspool of Twitter, and I have to kind of agree with her. Um, oh, oh, would you and Jolene please do a show together? Oh, honey, that would be like the height of my career. I love Jolene Lunzer. She is amazing, and I would sit on her back bookcase any day. Yep, it would be delightful to do that. Question here we have. Any update on Jennifer Crumbly? I have not looked it up lately, and I'm going to make a note of that, and we'll talk about it next time. Um, so I will look it up and see what is going on. I know that there are appeals in the pipeline, and you know how long that takes. Um, the Richard Allen, the defense has filed their appeals. Um, and their opening brief. And so we haven't seen a reply brief yet um, from the prosecution, but I'm sure that's coming. If you all would like me to go through and dissect that, I'm happy to do it. I know, it came out a few weeks ago while I was laid up, and I know there are a lot of law tubers who've already done it. If you guys would like me to go back and do that, I can. Um, I y- I have done a fair amount of research on Richard Allen's case. I have seen a fair amount of the discovery, so it might be one that we could talk about. Tiff Knox says, I'm here in Lompoc. I think that's how it's pronounced, right? Lompoc. If you need anything on Buzzard, I'm boots on the ground. Thank you very much for that. You might hear from me. Um, yeah, don't forget, we have a Facebook group that we chat about stuff every once in a while. It kind of waxes and wanes for how busy it is, but we definitely put any announcements about the channel on there. Um, just mess. Have I watched any interesting body cam footage lately? Yes, I have. And there are an awful lot of people who have been covering that body cam footage, so I'm not going to. But I certainly have been keeping abreast of all the work that Hella and Dolly have been doing, and all of the Mr. Bright Breakfast disclosures. Mr. Bright Breakfast is someone I've known for a while, and I think that he's a very credible source. So I am glad that he has had the courage to speak out. Um, Hi, Justine. This is Polly's daughter. Been making your bread every week for years now. Love you. Well, I love you too. Um, You know, I can't help, I love to cook, I love to bake, and so I love to share when I get a good recipe. We did post, in the on the community page and on, um, our Facebook group some recipes before Christmas, some of my favorite recipes for the holidays. So, and of course, my favorite holiday cocktail, which is a Bad Santa. And, bad Santas are lethal, you don't wanna have more than one, but, let's see here. This is just a comment, but my sister-in-law grew up on Mount Bachelor. Her dad used to run the ski resort. Oh, he must have been part of the, uh oh my goodness, they just went out of my mind. The Pape family, Pape, yeah. Were a family that owned a heavy equipment company, sold heavy equipment, and they owned the mountain for a very long time. And, you know, Mount Bachelor, I love Mount Bachelor. Haven't skied in years. Maybe now that I have a new knee, I don't know. We'll see. But, my kids ski, and, we've had a bit of a short season this year. We didn't get a lot of early snow, but the last week or so, we've gotten quite a bit, so hopefully they'll have a busier season now, and, but it's a beautiful mountain. It's a great place, and you know, Bend has grown. When I first moved to Bend, the population was 39,000. It's now 130. And so we've suffered a lot of the same growing pains, and the mountain has too. So it was sold to Powder Corporation. They own several resorts in Utah, I think. And it's just a different environment than it used to be. I mean, when we first moved here, it kind of was hometown. Everybody went to the mountain, and it was the locals all knew one another, and their kids all skied together, and it's different now. But it's still a fantastic ski mountain, and, Bend is still really a lovely, remarkable place. So come and visit. Um let's see. Um, don't forget, we're making quilt squares for Kay and Larry Woodcock. The pattern is folded cranes, origami cranes, and that is because in Japanese culture, folding 1,000 cranes is a way to remember someone who's passed away. So um, it won't have 1,000 squares by any means, but it's been a lovely project for people to make a square and mail it to me. We're gonna put it together and have it quilted and send it off to Kay and Larry. But I need about 16 more squares. So if you are a quilter or wanna try your hand at it, um, you can do that in the show notes. Uh, let me see. Oh, Tiff Knox was talking about the 5 women in Portland, I think. Yeah, they weren't their deaths were related, and they ended up being the same, perpetrator. But, yeah, so I'm gonna follow that one quite closely. I'm really, really interested in particularly in the story of this mother who just didn't give up on her finding out what happened to her daughter, and to the point where she was going to, uh, what appeared to be an abandoned school building and an abandoned building where this guy was living out of this abandoned building, and, I mean, she took some risks to be able to find out, what happened to her daughter. So I am, um, I'm she's really impressive, and I'd really like to to be able to tell her story. Um, okay, I hear would love Delphi updates in short form. I'm good with that. I'm good with that. I know that there have been a lot of folks who have really taken a deep look into the appeals documents, and they're long. I think they asked to exceed the page limit, and so appeals always have a page limit because the appellate court doesn't want a 300-page appeal, and but they are in some cases allowed to exceed the limit. So, hello, watching from Harlan County, Kentucky. I'm so glad that you are with us and that you like our channel. So, welcome. We have some very interesting people from a lot of places. We have had people in the chat from South Africa and from uh, all of the English-speaking countries, some of the Netherlands. What else? New Zealand, definitely. So, welcome to all you folks who are in other time zones. I appreciate that you're here because it isn't always the easiest to catch a live when you're having to factor in odd time zones. So, I'm going to put out a last call for questions. I'm going to say thank you to Jen, who is absolutely our moderator with the mostest. I appreciate you and all you do for us. And I'm sorry that our tech didn't wasn't friendly this time, but we'll get that kink worked out. When you've been away from it for 5 weeks, stuff happens. So um, I'm just looking at the last comments. Um, Tiff says, I haven't skied in 30 years. I don't think my muscles could hold up my brain's need for speed anymore. Yeah, I worry about that a little bit too, Tiff. I think if I try it again, I'm going to end up on the bunny hill. Um, oh, uh, here, whoops. Will Wendy ever be arrested? Boy, I think that's even odds. I don't know. I mean, we don't know what the prosecutor has, if there's more that they have that they haven't tipped their hand on. But um, I think it's possible. The case isn't the strongest, so uh, I I think it's probably 50-50. Hi, Tiff. I'm a roller skater blader, but my old lady muscles aren't what they used to be. You know what? When I was in law school, I I had a law school professor, and he did competitive roller skating. He did like couples, like you see ice skating, except it was roller skating. Dance moves and lifts and all that sort of stuff. And he was quite a character. But it was weird, to see pictures of him in his sequin spangly outfits, and then he'd come into class and he was all buttoned down. It was pretty funny. So. Sarah Grace Patrick, wondering why no child endangerment because of the 5-year-old in the house with a deadly weapon. I don't know because we haven't heard a lot about the facts. Um, Jen, they have actually done a pretty good job of keeping the facts of this case pretty close. So I don't know uh, why that occurred. It's an interesting case. It's been delayed because they were waiting for an evaluation, I think. Um, so it has now been delayed, but I will be following it as it goes along. We'll see. That is an interesting case in that um, it's another case that has really split the public. There are a lot of people who believe she's not guilty, and there are a lot of people who believe she is. One of the things that I heard they were talking about, that will be talking about, is again pretrial uh, evidentiary hearing. And they were talking about whether or not some of the evidence about her drug use, her potential promiscuity, and some other things were going to be able to come out in the court. And that certainly will be an argument about whether it that information is more prejudicial or more probative. Obviously, the prosecution is going to come in and say it goes to motive. You know, if she was having disputes with her parents about her behavior, then that goes to motive. I think the defense is going to come in and say, well, unless you can show some direct connection where people witnessed her and her parents having these arguments, and there's some evidence that was the case, then it's simply intended to prejudice the jury. So that will be that will be something to watch when that case goes forward. But I don't know how long it's going to be delayed. So I love being here with you guys. Our chat is amazing. We have the best community. And I just want to thank you all for being here tonight. I know that you could spend your Wednesday night other places. So thanks for being here. Thanks for all your wonderful chats. Thank you for your continued support. And we will see you next Wednesday. And at that point, hopefully, we will have some of our little bugs worked out and be moving along in a good direction. Look for the announcements coming out, I hope, in the next couple weeks about the Patreon series. And I, yes, Jen, best chat ever, always. So I appreciate you all being here. If you would like to reach out and you're not, you want to remain a lurker and not a somebody who chats, drop me an email or drop us a message in the show chat, because we are happy to answer questions. And I love it when you suggest cases, because I don't hear about all of them, and especially cases. And that's how I heard about Dee Warner, because cases that are not on the West Coast, I don't always hear about them. So if there is a case in your neighborhood that you would like me to take a look at, I'm happy to do that. So thank you very much. Oh, how about a book club on Patreon? Maybe. Um, y'all know there was a book club on Patreon that didn't do so well. Maybe. I think we'll start out with the Granny Files and see how it goes. But if we were to do a book club, it would have to be a book club of, murder mysteries and fiction and that kind of fun stuff. Um, and speaking of that, um, one of our followers, Susie Gay, sent me a couple of murder mystery quilter murder mystery books for my recovery, and they were great. So I enjoyed them. So I am going to say good night. Have a great week, and we will see you next Wednesday. Be well.